This is The Other 51. I'm Brian, and this week my guest is Tim Bontemps from ESPN. My guest this week is an NBA reporter at ESPN, formerly of the Washington Post, most importantly, formerly of St. Bonaventure University like me, Tim Bontemps. Welcome back to The Other 51.
Hey, Brian, good to catch up with you, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It's nice to be back in normal life again.
Yeah, well, as normal as 2020 is, but that is
right.
That is the main reason we're going to keep the Bonaventure talk to as much a minimum as two Bonaventure guys can. But I do want to talk about your experience of the past 3 months in the NBA bubble. But first off, just to catch up a little bit, last time I had you on a couple years ago, you were a reporter at the Washington Post covering the NBA. And now you've been at ESPN for, is it 2 years now?
Yeah, almost exactly. Year and about 50 weeks.
All right. So so first of all, how did that opportunity come up for you to move from the Post to ESPN?
Well, to be honest, it came completely out of nowhere. Kind of like my move from the New York Post to the Washington Post did also, frankly. I was covering the Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner. I was covering Adam Silver's annual preseason press conference in New York from my couch in San Francisco. I was watching on NBA TV on a Friday afternoon in September, and I got a text from Christina Douglas, now my boss, who's the NBA editor at ESPN, who I had met a couple times but didn't really know, didn't have her number, and she said, "Hey, I was hoping to talk to you about a job opening," which I hadn't applied for and hadn't thought about. So got on the phone with her for an hour, and then flew out to Bristol, had a bunch of meetings, and a couple weeks later had a job offer.
That's amazing. What was the adjustment like? Going from the Washington Post, a straight, newspaper, obviously with all the online accoutrements of the 2000s, but a newspaper going to ESPN, that a cable network. What was the biggest adjustment for you?
Just the sheer volume of people that I had to deal with, and the levels of communication that I had to deal with on all sides of things. At the Washington Post, I basically dealt with my editor, this guy named Glenn Yoder, the NBA editor. I talked to him every day, and that was really the only person I needed to talk to. I ran point on 99% of our NBA coverage. If anybody else was doing anything, I knew about it, kind of had to work around me on stuff. We had a great team. I'm not saying I was like Bigfooting anybody, but as the NBA columnist at the Washington Post, where that's a small slice of the paper, I kind of had I was able to call my shots on basically whatever I wanted to do. And at ESPN, that's not the case, because we have 1,000 people that all came here who all were doing that wherever they were at. So, like, for example, I used to write a lot about the Lakers at the Post because it was a huge team. People had a lot of interest in them, and there's always something to write about them. I maybe written 2 things about the Lakers in 2 years I've been here, because we have several people who are really good who cover the Lakers all the time and know everything there is to know about them. So there's no need for me to do that. So it's just it's a very different breakup of responsibilities than before. And then also the obvious difference is that, working at a place where there's also a whole television network and dealing with the whole TV component of things is something I had only very occasionally done previously. So that has been a big challenge, but it's been fun. And it's part of the reason I wanted to come here in the first place, was to kind of expand my skill set a little bit and push beyond what I had been doing, and try some different things and learn some different stuff. So it's been pretty fun.
So what are some of the ways that you've, and I can imagine going on camera at ESPN is a lot different than like the TV or video stuff that you would do at the Post or at the New York Post or other newspaper outlets. So what are some of the ways that you've kind of embraced that challenge and kind of worked to make that part of your repertoire?
Yeah, my first day here at ESPN was November 1st of 2018, and I covered Celtics Bucks, and I was on the 6 o'clock Sports Center, I think, that day, which was
Welcome to the family,
certainly a
kid.
welcome to ESPN move. It was like, yeah, we're gonna have him on to talk about this huge game tonight. And I mean, truthfully, the biggest thing has been we have absolutely incredible producers at ESPN who have been awesome to me and taken a lot of time to show me the ropes and teach me stuff and go over stuff with me again and again and point out stuff. Andrea Pelkey, who lives here in Boston, I've worked with the most. She's the best. Melinda Adams, who was just in the bubble with Malika Andrews, if people listen to ESPN's Daily Pod, they heard her on there. She's also the best. She's helped me a bunch. Tony Florkowski, who lives in Philadelphia. The thing I've learned about TV is that writing is a very solitary existence. You kind of sit there by yourself and you do it. And like, you have editors and stuff, but generally once you figure out how to write, like, you can sort of do it by yourself. Television is the opposite of that. It's the ultimate, like, cast of thousands operation. To do one, 2-question hit on SportsCenter, you need about 15 people.
Oh, wow.
To make that happen, between all the camera people and the sound people and the producers, where you're at, and then coupled with all the people who are taking in the feed and running the cameras in the studio and the studio hosts and the controller in the studio. Like, it is crazy the amount of people that you need to do television well. And so, the only way you're going to succeed is if you are willing to listen to the people who know what they're talking about and do what they say. And that's been the biggest thing for me, is we just have awesome people that, have really gone out of their way to make sure that I get the right instruction and I learn how to do it. And by no means am I perfect or anywhere close, but I definitely feel a lot better than I did 2 years ago. And it's just because of the work that all those people have put in to help me get better.
Sure. And what was some advice that you would have? Because I have a lot of students who want to be on ESPN, whether they're broadcasting students and kind of want to come up through kind of like the traditional broadcast ranks, or they're journalism students, or kind of get into the website or the multimedia stuff. So what advice would you give them if this were my class and you were speaking to them? What advice would you give to college age kids or kids just starting out in the business who want to be on ESPN someday?
I would say learn how to report and get information. And if you get information, you will get on TV. At the end of the day, the producers can teach anybody how to do TV to some degree. Like, I'm not saying that I'm never going to be Keith Olbermann, but they can get me to a point where I can go on TV and, I'm not going to fumble over my words and look dumb being on TV. They can't get me the information, and the TV people will deal with somebody they'll even deal with somebody who's not very good on TV if they have great information. But they're not going to bother with anybody who has no information. So that's really, that's the biggest message I would stress. It's no different than anything else. If you're able to get information that people want to know, whether it's writing a story or being on TV or, being on the radio or whatever, if you have something to say that people don't know yet or are going to want to know, you're going to get the opportunity to say it. And I think that's more important than any other advice I could give. Is if you focus on that and you have success with that, the other stuff will follow.
So kind of to play off of that really quickly, to be able to get information, what's your best reporting advice that you would give, or tips on how to get good at getting that information so that you can eventually get on TV?
I mean, I guess in the end, I've always said that building sources, and like building contacts is no different than making friends, really. It's kind of the same approach. If you're a nice person and you care about people and you try to build a connection with people, they're going to generally reciprocate that. If I cold call somebody who I've never talked to before, they're not going to be willing to give me much information. But if I know somebody and I talk to them on a regular basis and I know about their kids and I know about whether they just bought a house or not, or whether they just lost their job, or whether they, lost their job 6 months ago and just got hired somewhere else. Like, if you know what's going on with people's lives and you can talk to them about stuff, they're going to be much more willing to say, oh, hey, by the way, I heard about, this guy might sign with this team, or this team's talking about trading this player to this team, or whatever. But the only way you're going to get to that point is if you put in the time to build relationships with people. Because there's people hitting up the same people all the time, and they don't have to talk to anybody. And if they do want to talk to somebody, they're not going to talk to somebody who they've never had any relationship with before. So that's always been my approach, is to try to, just try to build long-term relationships with people, get to know people over a long time, and get to know them outside of work. And if you do that, and you take the time to do that with enough people, you're going to start to get information. And then once you start to get information, people recognize you as somebody who has information, and then they'll want to talk to you about that and give you more. And then it kind of builds on itself from there as you go forward.
Yeah, I know Woj has said that. Our mutual friend, Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN colleague of yours, fellow Bonnie, has said that to my classes, and I think on this podcast, is that you don't you work your sources is such a bad way of saying it. You keep in touch with people and make your calls so that when news happens, they'll call you back.
That's where I got the advice from. He is the best that's ever done this, period. So I listen to him, but that's always been his advice to me. It's just that, you go through and you try to call 5 people who you haven't called lately, and you just keep doing that over and over again. And again, the more relationships you have, and the more long-term relationships you have, the more likely that somebody's gonna, A, just pick up your call, and B, when they do pick up your call, say, oh, hey, by the way, I heard about this or I heard about that. Whereas if they talk to somebody they don't trust or they don't know, they're probably going to be a lot more reticent to say anything interesting.
Right. I remember Joel Sherman, too, giving me similar advice, the great baseball columnist and writer for the New York Post. I asked him for advice when I started baseball, and his advice was he tried to get something new in the paper every day. And that point was because you're always talking to people and, all the things that you were just saying, that you get big scoops basically by getting little scoops along the way and just learning stuff and getting a little bit every day. And it opens up to, hey, this big thing's about to happen. Or when something big happens, they'll give you a heads up, or they'll take your call or respond to your text when 50 people are texting them.
Yeah, no question. Another guy I used to work with, and he's awesome too. And yeah, I mean, it's all the same thing. It's like the old, in the Spurs locker room, they have this phrase, pounding the rock on the wall. And the whole idea is that, you hit the rock over and over and over again, and you don't really see any cracks in it, but all of a sudden, if you hit it enough times, it'll just break. And that's kind of the same. It's kind of the same mindset when it comes to reporting. That you're not going to get the story on the first try, or the second try, or the third try. But if you pound the rock long enough, it's going to work. The biggest story I got in my entire career was at the New York Post when I broke the news that Jason Kidd was leaving the Nets. And I got that story because I spent, the prior 2 years building a source relationship that I didn't really know or expect would ever pay off for anything. And the only time it paid off for anything was on that story. And I got the story because nobody else had built that relationship. And, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have got the story. I would have gone to somebody else. But it was that mindset and that philosophy that people like Joel and Adrian taught me working with them, that, I just said, well, there's no reason not to build this relationship. I'm just going to do it. If it leads to nothing, it leads to nothing. Maybe somebody will lead to something. And it just so happened that it led to a really big story.
So one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on this week was how you spent the previous 3 months of your life, or 76 days, in the NBA bubble.
Yes.
First of all, so for people who may not be familiar with it, what was the NBA bubble?
So the NBA back in March obviously shut down on March 11th I was in Milwaukee watching the game on TV when Rudy Gobert tested positive for COVID-19, and soon after, so did Donovan Mitchell. The Utah Jazz, the Thunder Jazz game was postponed. The next day, the whole league was shut down. Actually, that night, the whole league was shut down within like an hour. So the next day, we all went home. And then I was home for months and reporting on what was going to happen and how the league was going to try to come back. And ultimately, what was decided was that the NBA was going to have 22 teams, 22 of the 30 teams, the teams with the 22 best records, go to Disney World, owned by Jones ESPN, Walt Disney Company, and put on a bubble to have those 22 teams each play 8 regular season games to kind of build up to the playoffs, and then have the 16 playoff teams, like usual, play 4 best-of-7 series to determine a champion. And so that started in late July and ended about 9 days ago. And as you said, I was down there for some of my colleagues were down there a little longer, but I was down there for all of the competitive games. So I was there for, like you said, 76 days in total.
Okay. Did you request that, or were you assigned to it?
I was assigned to it. I had told my bosses, I had told Christina and my bosses that whatever they needed me to do, I was happy to help with. And if there was a bubble, I'd be happy to go. Because it's not an easy thing for, certainly I have a bunch of colleagues who have kids, and some have medical conditions. There was a lot of reasons where you'd be skittish about, not just going to a situation like that, but also traveling and dealing with everything else. I mean, that's a long time to be away, but yeah, I told my bosses I was willing, and then they asked me if I was still willing, and I said I was, and they asked me to go.
So did you have to quarantine when you got there or before you went?
So my situation was quite different from what most people who are listening to this have probably heard. So like my colleague Malika Andrews and Adrian, who you mentioned earlier, and a bunch of the other, Rachel Nichols, a bunch of the people you either saw on TV or heard about, they were in the bubble with the players, like in what was called the green tier, where you went to practices, you went to shoot-arounds, you went to games, you interviewed players in person, you interviewed coaches in person, etc. I was in the yellow tier, which was a slightly different existence. So I lived at a hotel off on the Disney property, but away from where the arena was, that was not part of the same complex that the players were at.
Oh, okay.
And then I would take a shuttle every day from the bus to the arenas and watch the games from the second level of the arena, but I couldn't interact with anybody in the green tier. So I could watch the games from, probably 50 feet farther away than where the green people were. And then I would go back home. And otherwise I would do interviews on Zooms like people at home. So I was like in an in-between place. There was like in the bubble, I called myself bubble adjacent, and then there were the people at home.
Okay.
And so I was bubble adjacent. So I was at a hotel where a bunch of like the secondary people from teams who weren't in the bubble, each team had 35 people in there. So like the GMs of a bunch of teams were at my hotel, owners of a couple teams are at my hotel. That I was with like the management staff who was kind of just there watching and wasn't involved in the day-to-day operations, as well as Mike Breen and the television broadcast crew, and Doris Burke and PJ Carlesimo and Mark Keshishire and the radio broadcast crew. That was who I was with every day.
So, random question: had you ever been to Disney World before this?
I've been to Disney World once. I went as a high school senior for our senior class trip.
Okay. So this is also a dumb question, but I was very curious about it. Were the parks open? Were you guys able to go to the parks at all?
I was allowed to go to Disney Springs, which is like a restaurant area. I did not go there. Some of my colleagues did in the yellow tier. I didn't go anywhere. The only place I left besides the hotel for 75 days was to go to the arena.
Okay.
Other people did go there. the people there, the park was open. We were not allowed to go to the park.
Oh, okay.
And the people who were in the green tier were not allowed to do any of that. They had to just stay at their hotel. They were in a much, because they were truly in a lockdown situation. Ours thing was more, you couldn't go anywhere, but people were coming in and out and traveling. Like when I got there, you asked me about quarantining. I never answered your question. When we got there, I had to get tested, and then I had to stay in my room until I got a negative test back. Once I got a negative test back, I could move around freely within the confines of the hotel. And we got tested twice a week. So, but there were people coming in and out regularly. It was a much more relaxed atmosphere than inside the bubble, which is partly why, some of my friends who have left have been, understandably a little stressed out after, literally only being in contact with people who are tested every day for,
sure,
to some cases more than 3 months. For me, I was sort of, because I was like staying in a regular hotel, and I don't know, it just kind of felt like suspended animation of real life more than like being inside of a bubble. So like when I went to the airport, I didn't really have a hard time reacclimating to society or anything like that.
Okay. So day-to-day life, it was just hotel and then shuttle game, and that was it?
So I had a very set routine. So I would wake up in the morning, I would do an ab workout, I would go run 3 miles on the same path every day, run 1.5 miles and then 1.5 miles back, get cleaned up, and then I would go to the gym. I did that until the final 4 weeks I was there, probably the final 3 weeks I was there. Because at that point there was just one game a day, and then you had, if those games were also at 9:00, so you'd wake up at 9-10 o'clock in the morning. And the thing about my job normally is that if you're covering the NBA finals or the NBA conference finals, typically you're going to shoot around, you're going to practice, there's some TV hits to do, there's some news stories to do, you're able to talk to people, you're able to have lunch with people, you can kind of fill the day up. And over those final few, it was one thing when there were 8 games from 1:00 till midnight every day. Those days were pretty easy to fill up because you just would be at games all day. When there was just a game at 9:00 every day, it got pretty hard to fill the day, let alone especially during the finals when there were no games at all. So on those days, I would end up running another 3 miles later in the day to kill a little bit more time. But yeah, I mean, I basically had the same routine every day for 75 days. I mean, that was the weirdest part about leaving, is that I saw the same 50 to 60 people every day for 75 days. And then all of a sudden I saw none of them, and I had the same routine for 75 days. And then I had just immediately stopped doing that. So that was the stranger part. That was really the strangest part of the whole thing, was just kind of the abruptness of, like, that night of Game 6 when the Lakers won. It was kind of like, well, all right, we're all going home. And 12 hours later, I was home.
Right.
So it was just kind of weird how suddenly it ended.
Yeah. So what's reporting look like, or what did reporting look like? I know it looks probably and feels very different, and and being in your yellow tier was probably very different. But also looking at what your colleagues were doing, how was reporting on the NBA and reporting on these games different, and I would assume challenging compared to what it was pre-bubble, pre-COVID?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting experience. I mean, it was an interesting experience. I found out I was going about a month before I went down there, and I spent a long time thinking about how I would approach it and try to do it differently, because I couldn't do the same stuff I always did. And no, look, a lot of it was by phone. A lot, like, I would be texting people I would be seeing at games. I would see them from far away, and we would joke about it, and I would text or call them on the phone. It also helped that I was able to have, I got to spend a lot of time with the execs that were at my hotel, so I got a bunch of stuff from them. That was really the positive for me, being at the hotel I was at. I got a lot of time with agents and a lot of time with scouts and executives. That stuff was all good. So I kind of just took advantage of what I had. And I tried to focus my work on the stuff that I did have access to. And when I wrote from games, I tried to, pass along stuff to people at home who were working that I could see in the arena, stuff that you couldn't maybe see on TV. Like after the very first game in there, the Pelicans Jazz game, Rudy Gobert scored the final points, did a walk-off interview, and then got a hug from Donovan Mitchell when he walked off the court. And they had a pretty famously tense offseason after the whole COVID diagnosis. There was some thought that one or the other gave it to the other, and it was kind of a strained relationship for a while. So I was able to pass it along to my colleague, Tim McMahon, who was writing about the game, and he was able to use that in his story. So was just trying to take advantage of the ability that I had to see stuff there and kind of use it in as many effective ways as possible.
Right. And what's it like now? We were talking earlier about that building relationships and having that personal connection with people. Both in the bubble and maybe before you went, and even now, you're not seeing people at games. You're not seeing people at arenas. It's more by Zoom. It's more by phone. It's more by text. How are you, and how can you kind of keep up that connection without that face-to-face interaction?
I mean, it's really just, you're just on the phone a lot. I mean, the way this job works, you only see people so often anyway. So, obviously I'm generally around teams like Toronto and Boston and Philly and New York a lot. And so I'm not around those teams at all. So it's a little different not seeing those people at all. But yeah, it's really just a matter of getting on the phone and calling people and, going out of your way to make yourself available to people, to talk to them and find out what's going on. It just requires, you just have to do a little more work under these circumstances. But at the end of the day, you also don't have any other work to do. So if you're not doing it, it's kind of an indictment of you if you're not willing to put in calls now, because, you shouldn't have anything else going on.
What was it like in the arena when there was no fans and just the very small group of people and players? What was that atmosphere like?
It was weird. It took a long time to get used to. One of my colleagues, Nick Friedel, came for the last couple of games, and it was funny to see him react to the oddities of being at these games in person after I'd been at probably 100 of them. It was kind of funny to see him kind of take all that in real time. But yeah, it was strange. I mean, the pumped in fan noise was weird in person. I could definitely see why it helped on TV. But it was jarring being there for it. It was weird being at finals games with 250 people in the building, instead of 20,000, but it also, what stood out to me was how intense the important games still felt. It felt like being at a big game still. And I think a lot of that is because even if there's nobody there, you still know what the stakes are, right? Like, you can't replace the, you obviously can't replace the fans being there, but you also can't forget, Game 7 of Celtics Raptors in the second round of the playoffs. You knew what was at stake in that game, and you felt it in the building. And it was the same thing when the Clippers lost to the Nuggets. It was the same thing when the Nuggets beat the Jazz in the first round. Those big important games, you felt, it felt like a big playoff game, which was the thing I was most curious about going down there. I really wanted to see how it would feel to be at games like that without the atmosphere around them. I wanted to know if it would feel like a playoff game, and they did. I mean, the important games felt like important games. And again, I think even if there aren't any fans in the building, you could feel the intensity on the court and among the players. And I give them full credit. I thought the quality of play was really high in the bubble, and I thought that led to really good basketball. And I thought it led to, really compelling games that even without fans there felt like huge, important moments.
So what did you miss most when you were in the bubble for 76 days? What did you miss most about life on the outside?
I miss my friends and family for sure. Obviously, that's the first thing. But beyond that, it just was, you miss just being able to do like basic stuff, like go to the grocery store or, just be on your couch. Like it's not like I was staying at a crappy hotel or anything, but it's not quite the same as being at home with your stuff and, having access to the normal comforts of home. So I would say that was the biggest thing beyond the people that you miss. It's just kind of the basic stuff that you can do on a daily basis that you don't really think about, that then when you're in a bubble and you can't go anywhere or do anything, it'd be kind of nice to be able to go run errands and like find stuff to take up the day, and you just couldn't really do it.
Right. So what was the first thing you did when you got out of the bubble? Obviously go to the airport and stuff like that, but kind of the first non-travel thing that you did to like be when you're out of the bubble.
I think I got home and went to the grocery store, I think.
All right.
I'm not going to a restaurant or anything. So yeah, no, I think we went to the grocery store the other day and got groceries. I think that was it. There's nothing too exciting.
No, that grocery shopping is always exciting. I'm old now, I say that, but absolutely. So I ask everybody I have on this, so I'll ask you again. What's the best thing you've read lately?
What is the best thing I've read lately? I've read a bunch of long form articles lately. I guess the best thing that I read lately was a piece I read this morning by my friend Ben Strauss, who writes for the Washington Post. He did a freelance piece a few years ago on Clay Travis, I think in 2017, kind of at the beginning of Clay's ascent. And I thought it was a fascinating look into kind of his worldview and the way his whole enterprise has been built up over the past while. It was called "This is Bad for America, but Great for Us." I put in Politico magazine. If anybody is interested in sports media at all, who's listening, which I suspect that you are, if you're listening, I think it was a very Ben is a terrific media writer to begin with, and he's also it also was a very compelling read on a person who's become a rather big figure in sports media, for better or worse, in the past couple of years. So I would say go look at that.
Yep, I will put a link to that in show notes, and I can recommend Jeff Pearlman's new book on the Lakers, Three Ring Circus. I have friends who've bought that and said it's great, and I have not had much time to read lately, but that Jeff is great, and I'm sure that book is great given the people that he talked to for it. So I would recommend it without reading. Yeah, it is everything you expect a Jeff Pearlman book on those Lakers to be. So it lives up to the expectations on that. So I'll have links to all of these on show notes. And Tim, well, welcome back to Civilization, and thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Other 51. Show notes for this and all of our episodes can be found at sportsmediaguide.com by clicking on the Other 51 tab. If you like the show, please consider giving it a rating and a review, either at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help people find the show. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.